Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay Good and I will be your instructor for Math 150 this semester. In this video, you will find some tips and tricks to be successful in Math 150. Research shows that in a mathematics course, learning specific study skills for that course will help you the most to be successful. And that's what I hope to share with you through this video. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. The objectives for this video are to understand how the brain works and functions, to learn specific study strategies for Math 150, and to learn strategies to overcome test anxiety. Let's first take a look at how the brain functions and works. Weinstein et al. Define science of learning as a cognitive process that is related to learning and retaining information. So when we take a look at the science of learning, we're really trying to figure out how our brain comprehends all the information that's coming in, how it processes that information, and how it allows us to learn other things. So when we talk about learning, there's a lot that's involved. There are 10 specific principles of learning that we want to make sure that we understand as we look at learning new content. We need to take into account our prior knowledge, our working memory, the cognitive load, building schema, spacing and interleaving, desirable difficulty, interactions with learning, metacognition, and language and learning. Let's take a look at some of these principles specifically to see how they relate to learning in mathematics. When it comes to learning, prior knowledge is very important. We want to make sure that we make connections to information that was learned previously to make it stick, to make us understand that information a little bit better. We need to make those connections in our brain to allow us to expand on that information. The working memory can be defined as the information that is currently held in one's mind. So this is the information that is at the forefront of our brains. As we're solving problems or as we're taking an assessment, we need to make sure that we have working memory available so that we can solve problems, so that we can do those higher order thinking skills that we need to. So we need to get information from our working memory to our long-term memory as a way to free up that space. The cognitive load determines how much information your brain can handle at one time. So when learning new information, it's important to understand that your brain can only handle and process so much information at once. Spacing and interleaving refers to the process of spacing out our learning and mixing learning activities. We may think that it's best to just learn one topic at a time, but actually our brain functions better if we learn bits and pieces at once so that our brain can continue to make those connections and move our information into our long-term memory. And finally, let's look at interactions with learning. We want to increase the number of interactions with the content that we're learning to best learn the information. Now that we understand how the brain functions and works, we want to take a look at some specific study skills that we can use in Math 150 to help us to learn the content and do our best in the course. Spaced practice suggests that we practice the content throughout the week. If we have class for one day of the week, it's best to study for 10, 15, 20 minutes every day rather than study the content all at once. The spaced practice allows us to make connections in our brain that will help us to take the information from our short-term memory into the long-term memory. Interleaving suggests mixing learning activities as we study the content. So rather than studying one subject or one topic all at once and then moving on to the next one, we want to take a look at studying each of those topics a little bit each day, which will help us to learn the information better. Retrieval practice includes quizzing yourself on information that you've learned. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Actually, it's best if it's not perfect each time. You want to go through and quiz yourself on the content. Making yourself try to remember that information will make stronger connections. One way that you can practice elaboration in a math course is to take your notes from class and go over those, add content to those, elaborate on the examples that were given in class, create another example very similar to what was given. Concrete examples refers to having specific examples that you can study. So if you look at your notes that you took in class, you can use those notes to study different types of problems. And lastly, dual coding refers to learning content in more than one way. For instance, you can draw a diagram and write out an example, or you can define terms and you could illustrate those terms. So any way we can code the information more than one way, again, will help us to make that information more concrete. Overcoming test anxiety is a large piece of the puzzle when it comes to success in a mathematics course. On the following slides, you'll find some suggestions for overcoming that test anxiety.